The 3 a.m. phone call shattered my sleep, like glass hitting concrete. Mom's voice cracked through tears as she screamed that my brother Jake was dying in the hospital after a motorcycle accident. $18,000 for emergency surgery, they said. Right now, or he dies. I listened to Dad sobbing in the background, begging me to wire the money immediately. My heart pounded as I gripped the phone, remembering every cruel word Jake had thrown at me for years. I sat up in bed, the phone trembling in my hand as Mom's desperate sobs echoed through the speaker. Beside me, Sarah stirred under the covers, her blonde hair catching the pale moonlight streaming through our Austin apartment windows. The digital clock on my nightstand glowed 3:17 a.m. in angry red numbers. "Danny, please." Dad's voice broke through Mom's crying. "The doctors say they need the money now for the surgery. Jake's internal bleeding is getting worse every minute. You're the only one who has that kind of cash available." I rubbed my eyes trying to process what they were telling me. Jake on a motorcycle. Jake bleeding out in some emergency room. Jake needing me to save his life with $18,000 I'd worked my ass off to earn as a software engineer. The irony wasn't lost on me. Growing up, I was always the backup son, the spare tire they kept around, just in case their golden boy needed something. Jake got the brand new Mustang for his 16th birthday, while I rode my rusty bike to my job at the grocery store. Jake got his college tuition paid in full, while my parents told me I was smart enough to figure out scholarships. Jake got their pride, their attention, their unconditional love and support. All I got was a lecture about responsibility whenever I asked for help with anything. "Which hospital?" I asked already, knowing something felt wrong about this entire situation. "Cedar Ridge Medical Center," Mom whispered between sniffles. "Room 423 in the trauma unit. Danny, they won't do the surgery without payment up front. The insurance won't cover experimental procedures." Cedar Ridge, the same hospital where Jake had supposedly been treated for a broken wrist last year, except I later found out he'd actually been in jail for 3 days on drunk and disorderly charges. My parents had covered for him then too, spinning elaborate stories to explain his absence from family dinners. How exactly did this accident happen? I pressed, swinging my legs over the edge of the bed. Sarah opened her eyes, concern creasing her forehead as she watched me pace to the window. "He was coming home from work." Dad explained, his voice steadier now. "Construction job ran late, you know how it is. Some drunk driver ran a red light downtown and slammed right into him. Jake's motorcycle got crushed under an SUV. Work. Right. The last time I'd seen Jake was 3 weeks ago at our cousin's birthday party, where he'd bragged loudly about his promotion to construction supervisor, managing crews on million-dollar housing developments across the city. He'd worn an expensive watch and driven up in a BMW that supposedly came with the job. Except 2 days later, I'd stopped for gas on the south side of town and seen my supposed big-shot brother pumping gas and cleaning windshields at a run-down Texaco station. When our eyes met through the window, Jake had quickly turned away, pretending not to notice me. I'd driven off without saying anything, but the image stuck with me. "Danny!" Mom's voice brought me back to the present crisis. "Are you still there? Time is running out." I thought about my savings account. $18,000 represented 2 years of careful budgeting, skipping vacations, eating ramen noodles, and driving my beat-up Honda instead of getting something nicer. Money I'd been saving for a ring for Sarah, for our future together. "I need to think about this," I said finally. "Think about it." Dad's tone shifted from pleading to angry. "Your brother is dying, and you need to think about it. What kind of person are you?" The same kind of person who remembered Jake stealing my college fund money to buy drugs junior year. The same kind of person who remembered Jake borrowing my car and returning it with a dented bumper and an empty gas tank, never offering to pay for repairs. The same kind of person who remembered Jake telling his friends at Christmas dinner that I was a pathetic computer nerd who'd never amount to anything. "Where are Jake's friends?" I asked. "What about all those construction buddies he's always talking about? What about his girlfriend Angela?" Why am I the first person you're calling? Silence stretched across the phone line for several long seconds. They don't have that kind of money, Mom said quietly. You're his brother Danny. Family helps family. Family helps family. Unless you're the family member who needs help getting through college. Unless you're the family member whose car gets stolen and wrecked. Unless you're the family member who gets blamed for every fight, every problem, every disappointment. I'm hanging up now. I said, my voice surprisingly calm. Call your golden child's friends. Call his boss at that construction company. Call Angela. I'm done being your ATM. Danny, wait. I ended the call and set the phone on my nightstand. Sarah sat up completely now, her green eyes wide with confusion and concern. What was that about? She asked softly. Same old story, I replied, climbing back into bed. Jake's in trouble, and somehow it's my responsibility to fix it. My phone immediately started ringing again. Mom calling back. I declined the call. Then Dad called. Declined. Then Mom again. I turned the phone to silent mode and pulled the covers up to my chin. But sleep wouldn't come. Instead, I lay there thinking about all the times Jake had hurt me, humiliated me, used me. The time he told my high school girlfriend I was cheating on her with her best friend, just to watch the drama unfold. The time he borrowed $500 for car repairs and used it to take another girl to Las Vegas for the weekend. The time he accidentally deleted my senior project from our shared computer the night before it was due. Each memory stung like a fresh cut, but they also strengthened my resolve. Jake had made his choices. Now he could live with the consequences. Around 4:30 a.m., my phone started buzzing with text messages. Uncle Robert, Aunt Linda, Cousin Michael, all begging me to reconsider to help save Jake's life, to be the bigger person and send the money. I deleted every message without reading them completely. As dawn broke over Austin's skyline, painting our bedroom walls with soft orange light, I realized something had fundamentally changed inside me. For the first time in my 32 years, I'd said no to my family's demands. For the first time in my life, I'd chosen my own well-being over Jake's endless needs. It felt terrifying and liberating at the same time. Sarah's coffee maker gurgled to life as sunlight flooded our kitchen. I sat at the small wooden table we'd bought at a garage sale 2 summers ago, scrolling through 17 missed calls and 43 unread text messages. Every single contact from my extended family, all variations on the same theme. How could I let my brother die over money? You look like hell, Sarah observed, setting a steaming mug in front of me. She'd already dressed for her job at the marketing firm downtown, her dark blazer making her look professional and put together. Everything I didn't feel right now. I feel like hell, I admitted, taking a sip of the strong coffee. Part of me keeps wondering if I made the right choice. The right choice about what exactly? Sarah settled into the chair across from me, cradling her own mug. You never really explained what happened. I gave her the full story, watching her expression shift from confusion to disbelief to anger. By the time I finished, Sarah was shaking her head slowly. So let me get this straight, she said. Your parents called at 3 a.m., claiming Jake was dying, demanding $18,000 immediately. And when you asked reasonable questions, they got angry. Pretty much. And this is the same Jake who's been treating you like garbage your entire life. The very same. Then you absolutely made the right choice. Sarah reached across the table and squeezed my hand. You can't keep letting them manipulate you with fake emergencies and guilt trips. Her words made me feel slightly better, but the knot in my stomach remained. What if this time was different? What if Jake really was hurt, and I'd just condemned my brother to death over old grudges? My phone rang at exactly 8 a.m., startling both of us. The caller ID showed an unknown number with a local area code. Danny Williams. The voice was crisp, professional, completely unfamiliar. Speaking. This is Detective Martinez with Austin Police Department. I need to speak with you about your brother Jake Williams. Can you come down to the station this morning? The coffee mug slipped from my fingers, hitting the table with a sharp crack. Coffee splashed across the wood surface, but I barely noticed. Sarah jumped up to grab paper towels, her movements quick and efficient, while my brain struggled to process what I just heard. Is he? I couldn't finish the question. Your brother has been missing for 3 days, Mr. Williams. Your parents filed a missing person report yesterday afternoon. They suggested you might have information about his whereabouts. Missing, not dying in a hospital, missing. I don't understand, I said slowly. My parents called me last night saying Jake was in the hospital after a motorcycle accident. Cedar Ridge Medical Center. Silence stretched across the phone line for several heartbeats. Mr. Williams, there's no record of your brother being admitted to any hospital in the Austin area. No motorcycle accident reports involving a Jake Williams. No emergency surgery. We need to talk. The phone felt heavy in my hand as the implications crashed over me like a tsunami. My parents had lied. The entire emergency, the tears, the desperate pleas for money. All of it fabricated. What time can you be here? Detective Martinez asked. Give me an hour. After hanging up, I sat staring at the coffee stains spreading across our table while Sarah cleaned up around me. The familiar sounds of our morning routine felt surreal now, like I was watching someone else's life through a window. Danny. Sarah's voice seemed to come from very far away. What did the police say? I told her, watching her face go through the same shock and confusion I was feeling. When I finished, she sank back into her chair, gripping her coffee mug with white knuckles. So the emergency was fake, she said finally. But Jake is actually missing. Apparently. And your parents told the police you might know where he is. That's what the detective said. Sarah was quiet for a long moment, processing everything. Then, her expression hardened with a realization that made my blood run cold. Danny, think about this carefully. Your parents call you with a fake emergency, demanding $18,000. When you refuse, they file a missing person report suggesting you have information about Jake's disappearance. Don't you see what they're doing? I saw it, but I didn't want to believe it. They're setting me up. They're making you look like you had something to do with whatever happened to Jake. The fake phone call establishes that there was some kind of family conflict involving money. Your refusal to help makes you look suspicious. But I was here all night. You can verify that. Can I? I was asleep when they called. I don't know what time you got up, where you went, what you did. Neither do the neighbors. You live alone most of the time since I only stay over 3 nights a week. The full scope of my parents' manipulation began to crystallize. They hadn't just lied about the emergency. They'd created a scenario where my natural reaction would make me appear guilty of something. My refusal to send money, my anger at being manipulated again, my decision to hang up and block their calls. All of it could be twisted to suggest I knew more than I was admitting. I need to get to the police station, I said, standing on unsteady legs. I'm coming with you. You'll be late for work. Work can wait. You need a witness to this conversation, someone who can verify your story about last night. Sarah grabbed her purse and keys, while I changed into clean clothes, my hands shaking as I buttoned my shirt. In 36 hours, my life had gone from peaceful and predictable to chaotic and dangerous. Jake was missing under mysterious circumstances. My parents had lied to police about my involvement, and I was apparently a person of interest in whatever had happened to my brother. As we drove toward downtown Austin, one terrifying thought kept circling through my mind. If my parents were willing to throw me under the bus to protect themselves, what exactly had happened to Jake? And how deep did this conspiracy go? The morning sun felt too bright, the traffic too loud, the world too sharp and aggressive. Everything had changed overnight, and I had the sinking feeling that my decision to hang up on my family was about to cost me everything I'd worked to build. The Austin Police Department downtown looked like every municipal building I'd ever seen. Beige, concrete, narrow windows, and an atmosphere of bureaucratic efficiency. Detective Martinez met us in the lobby, a compact woman in her 40s, with graying hair and intelligent dark eyes that seemed to catalog every detail of my appearance. "Mr. Williams, thank you for coming in so promptly. And you are—" She looked at Sarah with polite curiosity. "Sarah Chandani's girlfriend. I was with him last night when his parents called." "Good. I may need to speak with you separately." Detective Martinez led us through a maze of cubicles to a small conference room with fluorescent lights and white walls decorated only with a water stain shaped like Texas. "Please have a seat." She opened a manila folder and spread several photographs across the scratched table surface. My breath caught in my throat as I recognized Jake's apartment building, but the images showed a scene of complete destruction. Furniture, overturned drawers pulled out, and emptied papers scattered across every surface like confetti after a parade. "This is your brother's apartment, as we found it Monday morning," Detective Martinez explained. "His landlord called after Jake missed his rent payment and didn't respond to phone calls. The door was unlocked, which immediately struck us as unusual." I studied the photographs more carefully. Jake's expensive television lay face down on the floor, the screen cracked in spiderweb patterns. His leather couch had been slashed open, stuffing pulled out and examined. Even his kitchen cabinets hung open, contents dumped across counters and floor. "Was anything stolen?" Sarah asked. "That's the interesting part. The television, computer, and stereo equipment were all still there. Whoever did this wasn't looking for items to fence. They were searching for something specific." "Like what?" I asked, though I dreaded the answer. Detective Martinez flipped to a new page in her folder. "Your brother owed significant money to some very unforgiving people, Mr. Williams. We believe they came looking for either Jake or the cash he owes them." "How much money are we talking about?" "Our best estimate is $50,000, possibly more." The number hit me like a physical blow. $50,000. More than twice what my parents had demanded from me during their fake emergency call. $50,000 from what? Sarah asked the question I was afraid to voice. That's where things get complicated. Detective Martinez leaned back in her chair, studying my face carefully. "Tell me what you know about your parents' business operations." "They're retired," I said automatically. Dad worked construction management. Mom was a secretary at an insurance company. They live on Social Security and their savings. "When did you last visit their home?" I thought back, trying to remember. "Christmas dinner, so about 11 months ago." "Why?" "What we've discovered suggests your parents aren't as retired as you believed." Detective Martinez pulled out another set of photographs. These showed storefronts I didn't recognize: quick cash loans, instant check, cashing easy money now. "Your parents own 3 businesses in East Austin. Have you ever heard of these establishments?" "My parents, business owners." It made no sense. They lived in a modest ranch house, drove cars older than mine, constantly complained about money being tight. Dad still wore shirts with patches on the elbows. "I've never heard of any of these places," I admitted. "Check cashing businesses can be legitimate operations," Detective Martinez continued. "But these 3 locations have been flagged by our financial crimes unit for predatory lending practices. They charge interest rates that technically violate state usury laws." "You're saying my parents are loan sharks?" "I'm saying your parents operate businesses that lend money to desperate people at rates that can trap borrowers in cycles of debt they can't escape. It's not quite illegal, but it's certainly unethical." Sarah reached for my hand under the table, squeezing gently. I felt like I was learning about strangers who happened to share my DNA. "Where does Jake fit into this?" I asked. "Your brother served as the primary collections agent for all 3 locations. When borrowers fell behind on payments, Jake would pay them visits to encourage compliance." Collections agent. That was a polite way of describing someone who threatened and intimidated people who couldn't pay their debts. I thought about Jake's expensive clothes, his BMW, his bragging about construction work. All of it funded by terrorizing families who'd been desperate enough to accept predatory loans. "We believe Jake got greedy," Detective Martinez continued. "Instead of turning in all the money he collected, he started skimming significant amounts for personal use. When his clients realized what was happening, they demanded their money back. And when Jake couldn't pay, they took matters into their own hands. These aren't people who file lawsuits or report theft to police. They handle problems through more direct methods. The photographs of Jake's destroyed apartment took on new meaning. Someone had been looking for hidden cash, searching every possible hiding place where Jake might have stashed stolen money. "But why did my parents tell you I might know where Jake is?" I asked. Detective Martinez's expression grew more serious. "Because they told us about the phone call last night. According to your parents, you and Jake had an ongoing dispute about money. They said Jake had been borrowing significant amounts from you, and you'd recently threatened to cut him off financially." That's completely backward. I felt dizzy as the scope of my parents' manipulation became clear. Jake never borrowed money from me. If anything, he stole from me years ago. They also mentioned that you work in computer programming and might have helped Jake move money electronically. Hidden accounts, cryptocurrency, that sort of thing. I design software for small businesses. I don't know anything about hiding money or cryptocurrency. But even as I said it, I realized how the pieces fit together in my parents' narrative. Danny, the computer expert, helps Jake steal and hide money. Danny and Jake have a falling out over their criminal partnership. Jake disappears, and Danny pretends not to know anything about it. The fake emergency call suddenly made perfect sense. It wasn't about getting $18,000 from me. It was about creating evidence that I was involved in Jake's financial problems. My parents had called me, knowing I would refuse to send money, knowing I would react angrily, knowing I would hang up on them. Then, they could tell police that their sons had been fighting about money, and Danny's hostile reaction proved he was hiding something. "Detective," Sarah said quietly, "you need to know that Danny was with me all night. He never left our apartment. And the things his parents told you about him helping Jake with money laundering. Danny can barely balance his own checkbook, much less run some sophisticated financial operation." I appreciate that information, Ms. Chen. But right now, I'm more concerned about finding Jake Williams before his creditors do. These people don't negotiate or offer payment plans. If they find Jake before we do, he'll likely end up in a much worse condition than owing $50,000. I stared at the photographs spread across the table, my mind reeling with implications I was only beginning to understand. My parents weren't the loving, but misguided people I'd thought they were. They were criminals who ran illegal businesses and used their own son to intimidate vulnerable families. When their operation started falling apart, they'd decided to sacrifice me to save themselves. "What happens now?" I asked. "Now we keep investigating. We track Jake's movements over the past week, interview his associates, follow the money trail. And we hope we find him before someone else does." "What about Danny?" Sarah asked. "Is he considered a suspect?" Detective Martinez gathered the photographs and slid them back into her folder. "Right now, everyone is a person of interest until we know more. I'd recommend that Mr. Williams stay available for additional questions and avoid any travel outside the Austin area." As we walked back to the parking garage, I felt like I was seeing the world through different eyes. My entire understanding of my family had been shattered and rebuilt in the span of one conversation. Jake wasn't just the golden child who'd always gotten everything handed to him. He was a criminal who'd destroyed lives for money. My parents weren't retired innocents struggling to make ends meet. They were predators who'd built their comfortable lifestyle by exploiting desperate people. And somehow I'd become the fall guy for all of it. "Sarah," I said as we reached her car, "I think I'm in serious trouble here." "We'll figure it out," she replied, but her voice carried uncertainty that matched my own growing dread. By the time we returned to my apartment, 3 black SUVs were parked across the street, with tinted windows, and occupants who made no effort to hide their surveillance. Sarah gripped my arm as we hurried from the parking garage to the building entrance, both of us feeling exposed and vulnerable under their watching eyes. "Who are those people?" she whispered as we waited for the elevator. "Jake's creditors, probably. The ones Detective Martinez warned us about. Inside my apartment, Sarah immediately began packing a small suitcase, while I stood at the window watching the SUVs. The men inside were patient, professional, and absolutely terrifying in their calm stillness. "I can't stay here," Sarah said from the bedroom. "This is way beyond what I signed up for when we started dating." "I understand." The words came out more calmly than I felt. "I don't want you getting hurt because of my family's problems." "It's not just about the danger, Danny. It's about the lies, the manipulation, the criminal activity. I thought I knew you, but apparently your entire family is involved in loan sharking and extortion." "I didn't know about any of this." "How could you not know? How do you not know what your own parents do for work?" It was a fair question, and I didn't have a good answer. Looking back, there had been signs I'd chosen to ignore. The way Jake always seemed to have money despite working menial jobs. The expensive gifts my parents gave him for birthdays and holidays. The fact that they'd paid cash for their house and cars, despite claiming to live on Social Security. I'd been willfully blind because it was easier than confronting uncomfortable truths about my family. Sarah finished packing and stood in the doorway with her suitcase looking at me with a mixture of sadness and fear. "I need some time to think about everything. I'll stay at my sister's place until this gets resolved." "How long will that be?" "I don't know, Danny. I honestly don't know." After she left, the apartment felt hollow and strange. I made a sandwich I couldn't taste and tried to watch television, but every sound from the hallway made me jump. The men in the SUVs were still there when I checked the window again, a constant reminder that my problems were far from over. Around 2 p.m., my phone chimed with a text message from my bank. "Large deposit alert. $18,000 deposit processed to checking account ending in 4791. I logged into my banking app with trembling fingers, certain there had to be some mistake. But there it was, clear as day, a deposit of exactly $18,000 from Jay Williams, with a timestamp of 10:37 a.m. Right in the middle of my interview with Detective Martinez. My blood turned to ice water as I realized what had happened. Someone had deposited the exact amount my parents had demanded during their fake emergency call. Someone wanted it to look like Jake had given me the money they were looking for. I called the bank, immediately speaking with a customer service representative, who confirmed that yes, the deposit was legitimate, processed through an electronic transfer from an account belonging to Jake Williams. No, they couldn't reverse it without authorization from the sender. No, they couldn't provide details about the originating account without a court order. But I knew Jake hadn't sent me that money. Jake was missing, possibly dead. Someone else had access to his accounts, and they were using them to frame me for theft. My phone rang before I could fully process the implications. Detective Martinez again. "Mr. Williams, we need to talk. Can you come back to the station?" "Actually, I was about to call you. Someone just deposited $18,000 into my bank account, supposedly from Jake. I think someone's trying to frame me." "I know about the deposit, Mr. Williams. That's why I'm calling. We need to discuss this in person." "Should I bring a lawyer?" A pause. "That's your choice, but right now you're not under arrest. We're still gathering information." I drove back downtown with my hands shaking on the steering wheel, checking the rearview mirror constantly for black SUVs. The same conference room, the same uncomfortable chairs. But this time, Detective Martinez had a laptop computer open on the table. "Mr. Williams, I'm going to show you some information that came to light this afternoon, and I want you to explain it to me." She turned the laptop screen toward me. Bank records, transaction, histories, account details I'd never seen before. But there was my name, my social security number, my address listed as the owner of a savings account with over $200,000 in it. "I don't understand," I said, staring at the screen. "This isn't my account. I've never seen this before in my life." "The account was opened 6 months ago using your personal information. Large cash deposits have been made every few weeks since then, always in amounts just under $10,000 to avoid federal reporting requirements." "Someone stole my identity." "That's one possibility. Another possibility is that you've been helping your brother launder stolen money, and you're lying to me about it. Detective, I swear to you, I have never seen this account before. Someone opened it without my knowledge. The deposits correspond almost exactly to dates when your brother collected payments from overdue borrowers. It's a very sophisticated operation, Mr. Williams. Electronic transfers, multiple account layers, careful attention to banking regulations. I thought about my job designing inventory management software for small businesses. The most complex thing I did with computers was write database queries and user interfaces. I wouldn't know how to set up money laundering operations if my life depended on it. Can you check the IP addresses for whoever accessed this account? Can you see what computers were used to set it up? We're working on that. But the initial setup was done through a public Wi-Fi network at a coffee shop downtown. No cameras, no way to identify who was actually using the connection. Someone had planned this very carefully. They'd used my identity to create accounts I didn't know about, moved money through systems I didn't understand, and arranged everything so that when the investigation began, all evidence would point directly to me. Detective, someone is setting me up. Jake, my parents, someone in their criminal organization. They needed a fall guy, and they picked me. Why you specifically? Because I'm the family outsider. Because I refused to send money during their fake emergency. Because I have a clean record and a legitimate job that would make me look like the brains behind a financial operation. Detective Martinez studied me for a long moment. Mr. Williams, I want to believe you. But right now, the evidence suggests you're neck deep in this money laundering scheme. The fake emergency call could have been designed to establish distance between you and your brother before he disappeared. What would be the point of that? If something happened to Jake, you could claim you were angry with him, hadn't spoken to him recently, didn't know anything about his activities. It creates plausible deniability. I felt the walls closing in around me. Every decision I'd made, every reaction I'd had was being twisted into evidence of guilt. My refusal to help Jake was suspicious. My anger at my parents was suspicious. My ignorance about their criminal business was suspicious. Am I under arrest? I asked. Not yet. But I strongly advise you not to leave the Austin area while this investigation continues. Walking back to my car, I noticed the black SUVs were gone from my neighborhood. But somehow that didn't make me feel any safer. If anything, it made me more nervous. Were they following me now? Had they gotten what they wanted from watching my apartment? That evening, alone in my kitchen, I stared at my laptop screen, showing the bank account I supposedly owned, but had never seen before. $200,000 that could send me to federal prison for money laundering. Money that had apparently been flowing through accounts in my name, while I lived my normal boring life writing software and saving up for an engagement ring. My phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. You have something that belongs to us. We know where you live, where you work, where your girlfriend stays. Return our money, or things will get very unpleasant very quickly. I screenshotted the message and forwarded it to Detective Martinez, but I knew it wouldn't matter. The people who'd sent it were probably using untraceable phones and would disappear long before police could track them down. Jake was missing, possibly dead. My parents had betrayed me to save themselves. Sarah had left me because she couldn't handle the danger. The police suspected me of crimes I didn't commit. And now, professional criminals were threatening my life over money I'd never touched. For the first time since this nightmare began, I realized that simply being innocent might not be enough to save me. I spent the next morning sitting in a coffee shop across town, using their Wi-Fi to research private investigators, while constantly checking over my shoulder for black SUVs or unmarked police cars. The text threats had continued through the night, each one more specific and terrifying than the last. They knew which grocery store I shopped at, which dry cleaner I used, even which parking space I typically used at work. Rachel Torres had excellent online reviews and a website that emphasized financial investigations and missing persons cases. Her office occupied the third floor of a converted warehouse in East Austin, decorated with metal furniture and exposed brick walls that looked both professional and slightly intimidating. "Your story is complicated," Rachel said after I'd spent 40 minutes explaining everything. She was younger than I'd expected, maybe early 30s, with short black hair and intelligent brown eyes that reminded me of Detective Martinez. But not impossible. Family members frame each other for financial crimes more often than people realize. "Can you find Jake?" "I can try, but I need to be honest with you about something. If your brother is dead, finding his body might not help clear your name. It could actually make things worse by eliminating the only person who could verify your innocence." I hadn't considered that possibility. As long as Jake was missing, there was hope he might resurface and explain what really happened. If he was found dead, I could be charged with murder on top of money laundering. "What's your retainer?" I asked. $5,000 for 2 weeks of investigation. If I find solid evidence that clears you, we can discuss additional work. $5,000. Nearly all the cash I had left after my accounts had been frozen, pending the federal investigation. But what choice did I have? Where do we start? With Jake's digital footprint. Even people who think they're being careful leave electronic breadcrumbs everywhere. Cell phone towers, credit card transactions, security cameras, social media activity. Rachel had connections at various tech companies and financial institutions, people who could access information that wasn't available to the general public. Within 6 hours, she'd mapped Jake's movements for the week before he disappeared. "Your brother was very busy before he vanished," she said, spreading printouts across her desk. "Multiple cash withdrawals from ATMs across the city, hotel rooms paid for with prepaid debit cards, purchases of camping equipment and non-perishable food. It sounds like he was planning to disappear, or planning to hide somewhere until the heat died down. Look at this." She pointed to a map with red dots marking cell phone tower pings. "The last location we have for Jake's phone is here near Lake Travis, specifically near a property owned by Linda Hendricks. That's my aunt, my dad's sister. Does she have a cabin or vacation home out there?" I thought back to family gatherings and holiday conversations. "Yeah, she inherited a place from my grandfather. Old fishing cabin about 20 minutes from the main road. We used to go there when I was a kid." "When's the last time you visited?" "Years ago. Maybe 10 years. Aunt Linda doesn't really stay in touch with our family much anymore." Rachel was already pulling up satellite images on her computer. If I were planning to disappear for a while, a remote cabin would be perfect. Isolated, stocked with supplies, somewhere I could lay low until people stopped looking for me. But wouldn't that be the first place police would check? Only if they knew about it. "Did you mention your aunt's cabin to Detective Martinez?" I tried to remember our conversations. No, I'd focused on Jake's apartment, his work, his obvious hiding places. The cabin had never come up. "We need to take a look," Rachel said. "If Jake's hiding there, we can document it and turn the evidence over to police. If he's not there, at least we can eliminate one possibility." The drive to Lake Travis took 45 minutes through rolling hills covered in oak trees and patches of bluebonnet wildflowers. Rachel followed my directions to Aunt Linda's property, a winding dirt road that ended at a small clearing overlooking the water. The cabin looked exactly as I remembered it: rough-hewn logs, metal roof, screened porch facing the lake. But there were fresh tire tracks in the dirt, and smoke rising from the chimney despite the warm spring weather. "Someone's definitely here," Rachel whispered, pulling her car behind a cluster of cedar trees. "What do you want to do?" My first instinct was to march up to the front door and confront Jake directly. Demand answers, force him to explain what he'd done to my life. But Rachel grabbed my arm before I could get out of the car. "If he's here, we need to be smart about this. Document everything, get evidence that will hold up in court. Don't give him a chance to spin another story or disappear again." She pulled a camera with a telephoto lens from her equipment bag, snapping pictures of the tire tracks, the smoke from the chimney, the BMW parked behind the cabin that I recognized as Jake's car. "Can you get closer to the windows?" I asked. "Give me a few minutes." Rachel moved through the trees, like someone with military or police training, staying low and quiet as she approached the cabin from the side. Through binoculars, I watched her position herself near a window, adjusting her camera angle to photograph whatever she could see inside. When she returned to the car 15 minutes later, her expression was grim. "He's there," she said, showing me the images on her camera's digital display. "Very much alive, very comfortable watching television, and eating what looks like takeout Chinese food." The photographs showed Jake lounging on Aunt Linda's old sofa feet, up on the coffee table, looking completely relaxed and uninjured. No signs of violence, no indication that he was being held against his will or hiding in fear. He looked like someone on vacation. "That bastard!" I muttered, fury rising in my chest like lava. "He's been here the whole time while I'm getting threatened by criminals and investigated by police." "It gets worse," Rachel said, scrolling through more images. "Look at this." She showed me a photograph of Jake on his cell phone, animated and gesturing as he talked to whoever was on the other end. So much for being missing and unreachable. He's orchestrating everything, I realized. The fake emergency call, the frame job with the bank accounts, probably even the threats from his creditors. He's been pulling strings while hiding out here like it's some kind of game. "We need to get this evidence to Detective Martinez immediately," Rachel said. "But we also need to be very careful. If Jake realizes we found him, he could disappear again, or escalate whatever plan he has in motion." As we drove back toward Austin, I felt a strange mixture of relief and rage. Relief that I finally had proof of Jake's deception, but rage at the elaborate scheme he'd constructed to destroy my life. My own brother had been willing to send me to prison, maybe even get me killed just to cover up his own crimes. "Rachel," I said as we reached the highway, "I want to take Jake down completely. Not just prove my innocence, but make sure he pays for everything he's done." "That's understandable, but be careful about revenge fantasies. The best way to beat Jake is through the legal system, not by stooping to his level." She was right, but it didn't make me feel any less angry. Jake had spent his entire life manipulating people, hurting people, using people. And every time he'd gotten away with it, because my parents protected him, and everyone else was afraid to stand up to him. Not this time. This time, Jake was going to face consequences for his actions. Detective Martinez listened to my story with increasing interest as Rachel presented the photographs and timeline evidence we'd gathered. The images of Jake relaxing at the cabin, clearly healthy and uninjured, contradicted everything my parents had told police about their missing son. "This is excellent work," Detective Martinez admitted, studying the digital files on Rachel's laptop. "But we need more than photographs of Jake hiding at a cabin. We need evidence that directly connects him to the money laundering operation and proves he's been manipulating the investigation." "What kind of evidence?" I asked. "Recorded admissions would be ideal. Jake confessing to setting up the fake bank accounts, admitting he orchestrated the emergency call, acknowledging that he's been framing you." "How do we get him to admit any of that?" Rachel and Detective Martinez exchanged a look that made me nervous. "By giving him a reason to confess," Rachel said finally. "We set up a situation where Jake thinks he's won, where he feels safe enough to brag about how clever he's been." "You want me to contact him directly?" "We want you to contact your parents," Detective Martinez corrected. "Tell them you've figured out where Jake is hiding, but you want to work together as a family to protect him from his creditors." The plan they outlined was risky and complex. I would call my parents and arrange a meeting claiming I wanted to help Jake disappear permanently in exchange for having my name cleared from the money laundering investigation. The meeting would take place at a public location, wired with recording equipment, giving us evidence of my parents' participation in the frame job. "What if they don't buy it?" I asked. "They will," Detective Martinez said confidently, "because it's exactly what they want to hear. That you're willing to sacrifice yourself to save Jake, just like you've been doing your entire life." The restaurant Detective Martinez chose was perfect for surveillance, an upscale place downtown, with widely spaced tables, excellent acoustics, and security cameras that would document everything that happened. I wore a wire under my shirt and carried a backup recording device in my jacket pocket. My parents arrived exactly on time, looking older and more worried than I'd seen them in years. Mom's hair was unwashed, and her clothes wrinkled like she hadn't been sleeping. Dad kept glancing around the restaurant nervously, as if expecting police to burst through the doors at any moment. "Danny," Mom said, reaching across the table to squeeze my hand. "Thank God you called. We've been so worried about you." "Worried about me, or worried about your criminal operation falling apart?" Dad's expression hardened. "Watch your tone, son. We're still your parents." "Are you because parents don't usually frame their children for federal crimes?" "We don't know what you're talking about," Mom said, but her voice lacked conviction. "I know about the check-cashing businesses. I know about the illegal lending. I know Jake was your collection agent, and I know he stole money from the wrong people." My parents glanced at each other, communicating in the wordless way that long married couples develop. Finally, Dad leaned forward and lowered his voice. "Jake made some mistakes," he admitted. "But he's still our son. We couldn't let him go to prison or get killed by those animals he was working with. So you decided to sacrifice me instead. We thought you could handle it better," Mom said quietly. "You're smart. You have a good job. You understand computers and finances. If anyone could navigate a federal investigation, it would be you." The casual way she dismissed my life, my future, my freedom, made my stomach turn. To my parents, I was still the backup son, the one whose dreams and happiness could be sacrificed for Jake's benefit. "Where is he?" I asked. "We can't tell you that," Dad said firmly. "It's better for everyone if you don't know." "Actually, I already know. I found him at Aunt Linda's cabin, and I want to help him disappear permanently, but only if you clear my name first." The effect was immediate and dramatic. Both parents went pale, and Dad's hand started shaking so badly he had to set down his water glass. "You found him," Mom whispered. "Yesterday. He's been living there comfortably while I've been getting death threats and police interrogations." "Danny, you have to understand," Dad said desperately. "Jake panicked when those people started looking for him. He needed time to figure out how to pay them back. By framing me for money laundering, by borrowing your identity temporarily, it was supposed to be a short-term solution until he could make things right. Borrowing my identity, Dad Jake opened bank accounts in my name and moved $200,000 in stolen money through them. That's not borrowing, that's identity theft and conspiracy to commit federal crimes." "We know it looks bad," Mom said, tears streaming down her face. "But Jake promised he would fix everything once he got back on his feet." "How exactly was he planning to fix anything? The money is gone, his creditors want him dead, and the FBI is building a case against me." Dad pulled a knife from his jacket pocket, setting it on the table between us, with the blade pointed in my direction. Several other diners noticed and started whispering among themselves. "Here's what's going to happen," Dad said quietly. "You're going to forget you ever found Jake. You're going to stop cooperating with the police investigation. And you're going to take responsibility for the money laundering operation, like the good son you've always been." "Are you threatening me?" "I'm protecting my family. Jake is the future of our business, our legacy. You're just a computer programmer who never understood what it takes to build something real. By destroying innocent families with predatory loans. By providing services that banks won't offer to people who need help. We built our business from nothing, and we're not going to let some self-righteous ingrate tear it down." Mom reached across the table and grabbed my wrist. "Please, Danny, just take the blame for this one thing, and we'll make sure you have the best lawyers money can buy. You might get a few years in minimum security prison, but you'll be protecting your family." "My family? You mean the family that's been treating me like garbage my entire life? The family that's willing to send me to federal prison to save their precious golden child?" Dad's grip tightened on the knife handle. "You'll do what's best for this family, or you'll face the consequences." "What consequences? Are you planning to stab me in a crowded restaurant?" I'm planning to protect Jake by any means necessary, even if it means eliminating the threat you represent." The words hung in the air like smoke, and I realized my father had just threatened to kill me to protect my brother. After 32 years of putting Jake's needs ahead of mine, they were prepared to murder me to keep their criminal operation intact. "You know what, Dad, I think I've heard enough." I stood up from the table, and immediately Detective Martinez appeared with 2 uniformed officers, moving quickly toward our booth. Dad tried to grab the knife, but one of the officers had already secured it, while the other handcuffed him from behind. "Robert and Carol Williams," Detective Martinez announced, "you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit fraud accessory to money laundering and threatening to commit bodily harm." As my parents were led away in handcuffs, I sat back down heavily, my hands shaking from adrenaline. The recording devices had captured everything: their admissions of guilt, their knowledge of Jake's crimes, their willingness to frame me, and even kill me to protect their criminal enterprise. "Are you all right?" Detective Martinez asked, sitting across from me in the booth my parents had just vacated. "I think so. How much of that did you get?" "Everything we needed and more. Your father just confessed to conspiracy and threatened your life on tape. Your mother admitted to helping Jake commit identity theft. And we have enough evidence now to arrest Jake and shut down their entire operation." Through the restaurant windows, I watched my parents being placed in the back of police cars, their faces hard and unrepentant, even in defeat. They'd spent my entire childhood teaching me that family loyalty was the most important virtue, that blood was thicker than water, that I should always protect and support my brother. But when it mattered most, they'd been willing to sacrifice me without hesitation to save themselves. 6 months later, I stood in the courthouse lobby, watching news reporters interview Detective Martinez about the successful prosecution of what they were calling one of Austin's most sophisticated family criminal enterprises. The story had made headlines for weeks. Parents frame son in elaborate money laundering scheme. Jake had been sentenced to 15 years in federal prison for racketeering money, laundering, and conspiracy. My parents each received 10-year sentences, though they'd likely serve less time due to their cooperation with ongoing investigations into organized crime connections throughout East Texas. The illegal lending businesses had been shut down and their assets seized, with the money being distributed to families who'd been victimized by predatory loan practices. Detective Martinez estimated they'd helped more than 300 families recover stolen money or escape crushing debt cycles. "Danny." A familiar voice made me turn around. Sarah stood near the courthouse entrance looking professional in a navy blue suit I'd never seen before. "I didn't expect to see you here," I said, walking toward her with a mixture of hope and uncertainty. "I wanted to be here for the sentencing, to support you." We found a quiet coffee shop nearby and spent 2 hours talking about everything that had happened since she'd moved out during the crisis. Sarah had followed the case through news reports, watching from a distance, as my innocence was proven and my family's crimes were exposed. "I owe you an apology," she said finally. "I abandoned you when you needed support most. I was scared and confused, but that doesn't excuse leaving you to face everything alone. You don't owe me anything. What my family put you through was terrifying and completely outside normal human experience. Still, I should have stayed, or at least stayed in contact to make sure you were okay." I thought about those dark weeks when I'd been suspected of federal crimes, threatened by criminals, and betrayed by my own parents. Sarah's departure had hurt, but it had also forced me to develop strength and independence I hadn't known I possessed. "I learned something important about myself during all this," I told her. "I spent 32 years trying to win my family's approval, accepting whatever treatment they gave me because I thought that's what loyalty meant. It took nearly losing everything to realize that real relationships are built on mutual respect, not obligation." "Have you spoken to any of them since the arrests?" "Jake wrote me a letter from prison last month. A real apology, not just excuses or manipulation. He admitted that he'd been jealous of my education, my legitimate career, my stable life. Said he'd always felt like a failure next to me, which is why he treated me so badly. Do you forgive him? I considered the question carefully. I forgive him in the sense that I'm not carrying anger anymore. But forgiveness doesn't mean pretending the past didn't happen, or reopening myself to future abuse. Jake made his choices, and now he has to live with the consequences. Sarah nodded slowly. What about your parents? Same thing. I hope they use their prison time to reflect on what they've done and become better people. But I'm not waiting around to find out. I've built a new life that doesn't depend on their approval or acceptance. That new life included a promotion at work, where my experience navigating a federal investigation had actually made me more valuable to clients worried about financial fraud. I'd also started volunteering with a nonprofit organization that helped families escape predatory lending situations using my experience to identify warning signs and connect people with legitimate financial assistance. I've been thinking about what you said, Sarah said quietly, about relationships being built on mutual respect rather than obligation. Yeah. I'd like to try again if you're open to it. Not picking up where we left off, but starting fresh with a better understanding of what we both need from a partnership. I looked at this woman who'd shared 3 years of my life, who'd fled when things got dangerous, but had the courage to come back and admit her mistakes. Sarah had always been kind, intelligent, and supportive during normal times. Her reaction to the crisis had been human and understandable, even if it had hurt. I'd like that too, I said. But I need you to understand something. The person you're dating now isn't the same guy who would do anything to avoid conflict with his family. I've learned to set boundaries, to stand up for myself, to walk away from relationships that aren't healthy. Good. I fell in love with your kindness and intelligence, not with your willingness to be a doormat. We talked for another hour about practical things, dating expectations, communication styles, future goals. It felt different from our previous relationship, more honest and direct, less about avoiding conflict, and more about building something strong enough to handle inevitable disagreements. As I drove home that evening, I thought about the strange journey that had brought me to this point. A year ago, I'd been a people pleaser who'd spent his whole life trying to earn love from people who were fundamentally incapable of giving it. The crisis with Jake and my parents had been devastating, but it had also freed me from illusions that were holding me back. I'd learned that family isn't defined by blood or obligation, but by people who genuinely care about your well-being and growth. I'd discovered that saying no to unreasonable demands wasn't selfish or mean, but necessary for maintaining healthy relationships. Most importantly, I'd realized that my worth as a person wasn't determined by how much I was willing to sacrifice for others. My phone buzzed with a text message as I pulled into my apartment complex. Rachel Torres, the private investigator who'd helped expose Jake's deception. Saw the news coverage of today's sentencing. How are you holding up? Better than expected, I replied. Thanks again for everything you did to help me. Just doing my job. But I'm proud of how you handled everything. Takes real courage to stand up to family manipulation. That night, I cooked dinner for myself in my peaceful kitchen, the same apartment where this nightmare had begun with a 3 a.m. phone call. But everything felt different now. The space that had once felt like a hiding place now felt like a sanctuary I'd created through my own choices and efforts. I thought about all the people who'd been hurt by my family's criminal activities. Families struggling with medical bills or temporary unemployment who'd turned to my parents' businesses for help, only to be trapped in cycles of crushing debt. Workers who'd been intimidated and threatened by Jake when they couldn't make payments. Elderly people who'd had their Social Security checks garnished to pay impossible interest rates. My family had built their comfortable lifestyle by exploiting people who were already suffering, and they'd been willing to destroy my life to protect that system. But their exposure had helped shut down operations that were destroying hundreds of families throughout Central Texas. Sometimes justice doesn't feel satisfying because it doesn't undo the damage that's been done. Jake's victims didn't get back the years they'd spent in financial hell. My parents' borrowers didn't recover the stress and humiliation they'd endured. And I couldn't reclaim the decades I'd wasted trying to earn love from people who saw me only as a tool to be used for their benefit. But justice had prevented further damage, and that was something worth appreciating. Before bed, I opened my laptop and began writing an email to Detective Martinez. I wanted to thank her for believing my story, when all the evidence seemed to point toward my guilt for working tirelessly to uncover the truth, for treating me with respect and dignity throughout the investigation. As I typed, I realized this case had probably been routine for her, just another family financial crime among hundreds she'd worked over the years. But for me, it had been the defining experience of my adult life, the crisis that had forced me to grow up and learn who I really was beneath years of conditioning and manipulation. I finished the email and closed the laptop, feeling genuinely at peace for the first time in months. Tomorrow, I'd return to my normal routine work time with Sarah, volunteer activities, building the life I wanted rather than the life my family had expected me to accept. The 3 a.m. phone call that had started this entire ordeal had been designed to manipulate me into sending money to save Jake from a fake emergency. Instead, it had led to my liberation from a toxic family system that had been limiting my potential for decades. Sometimes, the worst thing that happens to you turns out to be exactly what you needed to become the person you were always meant to be. I want to ask all of you something important. Have you ever been in a situation where family members tried to manipulate you into sacrificing your own well-being for their benefit? How did you handle it? And what did you learn from the experience? Please share your stories in the comments below, because I think hearing from others who faced similar challenges can help all of us recognize manipulation tactics and respond more effectively. If this story resonated with you, please give it a like to help other people find it who might be dealing with family manipulation or financial abuse. And don't forget to subscribe for more true stories about overcoming family dysfunction and building healthier relationships. Finally, please share this video with anyone you know who might be struggling with toxic family dynamics. Sometimes people need to hear that it's okay to set boundaries with relatives who don't respect them, and that choosing your own well-being over family obligations isn't selfish. Thank you so much for listening to my story, and I hope sharing it helps someone out there find the courage to stand up for themselves when it matters most. Remember that you deserve relationships built on mutual respect and genuine care, not manipulation and exploitation. Take care of yourselves, and I'll see you in the next video.